in the UP tradition. Let me go on the phone line and speak to a journalist who has covered lots of political issues, has hosted a television program for more than 20 years and still doing that, studied political communication and has been practicing journalism for more than 2 decades. Paul Adom-Otchere hosts Good Evening Ghana on Metro TV. He's joined me on the line. Sir, you're welcome to Eyewitness News.
Good evening, Mario. Good evening.
I know you've covered lots of political, historical moments. I'm not sure you covered what happened in 79, but as someone who has been doing media for all these years, clearly that's a worthy reference point in discussing Alan's exit from the NPP today, no?
I'm not sure whether it is. If you look at the 79 example, the circumstances of 79 is quite different, and we can get to that. What is similar to Alan Kyerematen's situation for the generation of people who are much younger is the 2000 election where Charles Reku-Brobe, who was a founding member of the NPP, a very senior and important member of the Alliance for Change that wrote the Kumi Preku election demonstrations, a very important member of Kwame Pianim's campaign of the 1996 NPP presidential event, who then decided to leave the NPP because he felt that the party was incapable of winning the 2000 elections, even though he felt the election was up for grabs. And he set up a different party. The circumstances of Reku-Brobe's agitations at the time are very, very similar to Alan Kyerematen's concerns about how he has not been allowed to operate. This was Reku-Brobe's issues, how he has not been allowed to operate, how the party is being hijacked by some people, how his contribution has been overlooked and is not respected. A lot of the things Dr. Brobe said were about how he has been treated, or allegations of how he has been treated. It came as a big deal. But then he ran as an independent candidate in a party called the UGM, something like that. And so that's very similar to Alan. You can also look way behind 79 and go all the way to 10 years earlier, in 1969. After the coup that overthrew Nkrumah and politics was coming again in terms of party politics, there was a guy, a very important member of the NPP called Joe Appiah. He's actually a legend of the NPP. Joe Appiah started his life as a CTP with Victor Usu and others, and then was moved to the UP tradition. Joe Appiah had been studying abroad in exile with Professor Buzia. When Buzia was selected as the leader of the party, Appiah was very unhappy with the selection of Buzia, and he became a thorn in the flesh of the system. Eventually, he stepped out to form his own party, but he couldn't even manage a parliamentary election. That was parliamentary elections, and Appiah did not even win his own seat in Kumasi. So the similarities of Alan Kyerematen will be better placed looking at Charles Reku-Brobe's example of 2000 and Joe Appiah's example of 1969. The 1979 is a completely different kettle of fish, which we can talk about.
Indeed, that kettle of fish, many believe, is the reason we had the man from Golu becoming the president of the land. The question now is, now that we are seeing Alan exiting the party at this crucial moment, does it pave the way for the man from Bole to come to the Jubilee House?
If you look at Alan's situation as similar to 79, then you may ask that question. But those of us who think it's dissimilar, I don't think that question arises.
Why do you think it's dissimilar?
It's dissimilar because the 79 election, the circumstances were as follows. A coup had taken over party politics after the Buzia era. Achampong had staged the coup. So the coup era has seen a lot of demonstrations occurring in the mid-70s. And the force of the demonstrations was the whole impetus that got the palace coup against Achampong and eventually the revolt of June 4th. Some people thought that that group of people who, without party politics, had led that revolution, that onslaught, that demonstration, that social awareness, the consciousness that was created by the PMMFJ, that's what it was called, an amalgamation. Many people thought that the PMMFJ, as it was, populated by former politicians, former members of parliament, professional associations, students of Ghana, they thought that the PMMFJ should be snowballed into a political party to change the dynamics of the country. And so that was the circumstances of the time. So a lot of people felt that we should go with the PMMFJ group. But the traditionalists of the UP insisted that they needed a traditional UP party. So that was the conversation at the time. So if you take a stalwart like Professor Adom-Otchere, what he became for the NPP, Adom-Otchere was actually one of those who felt that the movement that overthrew the military and brought back party politics, that movement should be formed to form a political party. They also argued that the traditional setting of the UP tradition was steeped in Menchia Palace and Ashantism. And they thought that that needed to change because the NLM, the National Liberation Movement, out of which the UP was formed in Menchia Palace. It had its objectives about supporting Ashanti cocoa farmers. So the Adom-Otcheres of the mid-70s, the Obeda Samuels, the Alhaji Muhammad Idrisus, Dr. Gama, Sami Okujeto, Peter Alajete, they all felt that this intrinsic association of Ashantism with the UP tradition should change by forming a party that has a broad base. So that's why their party mantra was broad-based. They called it broad-based the best, and they called it a convention. So that was the circumstances of the time. The force of forming a party that did not have the intrinsic appearance of the NLM at the time was much, much greater than the circumstances of Alan-Kyerema Martin today. So when the traditionalists felt that they needed a political party, they asked William Oforiatta if he wanted to contest the election. They were confident that if an election is thrown up, the support of Ashanti region for Victor Usu was going to be significant. They also believed that the support of Ashanti region will be endorsed by Eastern region and the general Akan community in Middle Belt to Southern Ghana. This was one of the agitations of Akentena Pianinka, who believed that, if you read his book, it's there. If you read Don Kofojo's book, it's all there. Who believed that if we were to go to a contest, the Akan force will make Victor Usu win. It appeared that William Oforiatta suspected that. So he didn't participate. Initially, he said he won't participate in the contest. When the contest came, Owusu won anyway. So Owusu became the flag bearer of the UP tradition as it was. And then the forces around then convinced William Oforiatta that you should also run. Now, that election, that 79 election, had also the Nkrumah's position divided in the same manner. Many people don't talk about that. But I'm happy that Professor Ivan Adai-Mensah writes it out in his book, that if they talk about the UP being divided, then Nkrumah was more divided. If you look at the list of political parties that contested 79, Colonel Banasco was a famous Nkrumah, the Action Congress Party. He didn't join the PMP of Imoro Igala. He felt that Imoro Igala was not subscribing to the dictates of Nkrumahism. And so Colonel Banasco ran on his own. I believe that PKK Kwedu also ran on his own. So the Nkrumah's party for 79 election was more than two. The Dankwa Buzia's parties for the 79 election were two. So that was the circumstances of the 79 election. I do not see how anybody can relate 79 to what is happening today. You can relate what is happening today better in similarity terms to 2000 Rekubrobe and to Joe Appiah of 69.
So the ethnicity bit of Alan being an Ashanti and the party currently being led by an Achim would not play out at all, you think?
I don't know whether it will not play out. We have to analyze that. But I'm just saying that what Alan-Kyerema Martin has done today is dissimilar to the events of 1979.
Okay. You've given a parallel in the NPP. So Rekubrobe for you, the UGM issue of 2000. How about if we wanted to extend it to the NDC side so that we can then come to a convergence at the point and ask what becomes of Alan-Kyerema Martin? We have seen similar things in the NDC too. You've talked about the divisions in 1979 in the Nkrumah's party, but let's come in recent times and look at the NDC itself. We've seen people break away from that party. We can put all these together and analyze to ask the question, what does Alan's exit mean? Can you help us?
If you look at Alan and you want to look at recent examples from the NDC, the classical would be Guzi Tano of the Reform Party in 2000. Because Guzi Tano in 2000 was concerned that the leadership of the party had produced males who was illegitimate. That's the concern of Guzi and his friends, Peter Podube. I worked directly with the Reform Party, so I know everything that happened there. I was in Guzi's office almost every day. So Guzi was with Peter Podube, was with Sam Gaba, Chichi Opoku, Mije Bano. They had constituted a certain think tank around the Rawlings enterprise. They had been the think tankers who had been doing the research and doing the election analysis for Kojo Chikata and all of them. So they had been an important group in the party. Just to say, I'm not finding a good word for who they were, but They were more than important. I'm not finding the word for it. So this group of people felt that if Rawlings was exiting by the constitutional limitation, the party needed to conduct a proper congress so that the grassroots would choose their new leader. It was sprung upon them one day in Swedru in the central region when the Fancy Confederacy of Atuahoi, Kwame Nahoi, Tutubi Kwachi, and others had orchestrated a situation where Flight Lieutenant Rawlings was convinced that Mills should be his successor, and Rawlings was encouraged in Swedru to make a public announcement. And so what has now become known as the Swedru Declaration, J.J. Rawlings then said that his vice president will replace him. That offended Guzi and others, and they thought that this was completely illegitimate. So they set out to form a party which they call Reform. Reform because they wanted to reform the NDC in its democratic ethos. They felt the NDC lacked the democratic, they had a huge democratic deficit. So they called their party Reform. And then they set out in election 2000, and then we know the results of what happened. So if you're looking for similarities with the Alan-Kyerema Martin situation of today, you will look at Guzi Tano in the NDC, Reku Brobe of the NPP, Joe Appiah of the UP era.
Would it be far-fetched to introduce Nana Konadu Rawlings, who also left the NDC during the presidency of Mills, to form her own political party?
It certainly wouldn't be, because her complaint was also very similar to Guzi's complaint. Incidentally, both involved Professor Mills. So her complaint was also that continuing to keep Professor Mills as the candidate of the party was unhealthy, and that she will participate in a congress that will hopefully bring her up as a leader. When the congress came, she felt she had been cheated, similar to the kind of sentiments that Alan-Kyerema Martin is expressing today. Nana Konadu felt that she had been cheated. She felt that the congress was not properly done. So yes, that's quite similar. And then she was disqualified for the 2012 elections, if I remember. But in 2016, she was on the ballot.
Okay, now this is the issue, and that's the main one we're going to talk about. Alan has done what these people have done in the past. If you look at just the history on the face of it, you would say it's a pointless decision, it's a suicidal mission. But there are others who hold the view that the past is not a prophecy at all. It's just what it is, the past. And that Alan's decision tonight could be a very significant, which would disturb or destabilize the Elephants Party. What's your take on that, considering his weight?
Well, in politics, everybody is important. You can't describe any individual as being unimportant in politics. So I don't think that people will say that what he's done is, it will not affect the NPP. Time will tell. We have to wait to see what happens. But then you take the indications. We are going into an election which is only a year away. He has come up with an independent candidate. Many people or many analysts will look at it at the outset and say that an independent candidate is unlikely to win Ghana's election. Not because we don't like independent candidates, but the sheer organizational capacity that the independent candidate may not get. There are 38,000 polling stations in the country, maybe more. There are 275 constituencies in the country. And you need to organize in electoral areas. The force of a political party is better equipped to be able to run around all 38,000 polling stations, to be able to create cells in all of those places. Independence is going to be very difficult to do that within a year. So that's why people will say that an independent candidate cannot win, which we agree with. Okay. Can an independent get significant votes to derail one party or the other, to give an advantage to one party or the other? Because in this Alan circumstances, the National Democratic Congress seemed very happy about it, and I would have been if I were a member, and the NPP are concerned about it. So going into the election, Alan is talking about the youth. So let's look at the youth constitute the majority of the voters. The youth are the decision makers of the country, and usually of every country. Especially at this stage in Ghana, the youth have more power because they have more numbers and they are educated. So looking at that thing, will the youth, let's say Alan is going to pick 100,000 votes. Where is the 100,000 going to come from? That's the question we're asking. So question number one, is 100,000 going to come from NPP people? My answer to that is almost a no. It's a bit too early, but I think it's no. Because NPP people know that they are going into an election that they can win and they can lose. It's crucial. They're asking for a third term. It's a difficult election. So an MPP youth person will feel that voting for Alan is throwing my vote away. Because you vote for Alan and he ends up with a ridiculous percentage, nothing happens. So they are more likely to vote for their party. The NDC youth as well. NDC have been in opposition for 2 terms. They are being frightened by a break the eight phenomenon. They don't want that break the eight to happen. They certainly want the eight to be destroyed. They shouldn't be broken. They want the NPP out. They want their candidates to win. So NDC youth are not going to even pay attention to potentially vote for Alan. They may support him on social media. They may support him in rhetoric. But in terms of casting the ballot, they are going to vote for John Mahama. Now we have the middle, which is always the decision maker in Ghana. Will the middle then decide that, given the circumstances, they are voting for Alan? I can tell you that by the time the campaign hits a crescendo, if Dr. Bawumia becomes the NPP candidate, with the kind of campaigning that he does, which he's going to do, when the campaign reaches a crescendo and it's John Mahama versus Dr. Bawumia, people will even forget that Alan Martin is participating. It's going to be such a feisty election. It's going to be brutally fought, and nobody's going to remember that there's a third candidate. I can assure you of that. But we still need time for us to see how the Alan thing pans out.
So for you, the biggest loser of tonight's declaration is Alan himself and not the NPP, not the NDC.
I don't think there's a loser and there's a winner. It just helps us to understand the times and the seasons, and we give ourselves time to observe. But if you want to look at history, as people say history is not a prophecy, I will say that Solomon in Ecclesiastes in the Bible said that there's nothing new under the sun. He said what has happened is what will happen again. What has been is what will be again, because there's nothing new under the sun. Solomon said it in Ecclesiastes. If we want to go by that, then we will say that Alan Martin will crash out like Robe and like Joe Appiah.
I was going to introduce the smaller political parties and talk about Dr. Papa Kwesi Ndum's exit from the CPP, Ayariga's exit from the PNC, but it appears all of those things will come up to the same thing we've just been talking about.
I guess so, Maru. I guess so. But it's an interesting time for us political reporters. This is just interesting.
Exciting, I think. And we wait to see what happens. Thank you so much for speaking to us, Paul.
I greet you.
Paul Adom-Otchere was maybe first host of Eyewitness News, now hosts Good Evening Ghana on Metro TV.